Hey there.
Morning, Gert.
Good morning.
Sorry.
Good after evening.
I'm running a bit late.
We were just doing a quick check for stage, and I guess it's not there yet, eh?
No, I had to pull it on the last minute because there was some things that changed with the latest version of Xcode, and none of the icons appeared, so I kind of had to rebuild it.
Oh.
So it's going through the whole process again. So, but it should be there in a week or so, I hope.
No problem.
Just depends on how long it takes Apple to get through it.
Yeah, Larry was just wondering, and I thought my iPad's right here. I'll have a look.
Yeah, a whole lot of things changed actually with iOS 6 when that came out, and kind of weirdnesses that aren't mentioned anywhere, and I kind of stumbled into that. So, but it should be there.
I don't need it yet.
Anytime soon, actually. The fixed version has been,
I
think, updated last week Monday, so usually it takes a week or two. So, hey, Dag.
Morning.
Hello.
Hello, good to see you.
I decided to go for a quick run, so I'm still a little bit... I really arrived and just plugged everything in, so I need to come down still.
Great. I liked your demo with PPG. That looked real good.
It is really nice, and Wolfgang is quite a nice guy to work with. I've been for the past 3 days, every 3 hours he was sending me a new version, and I was testing that new version, and then it's going back and forth. I think he uploaded I know how many versions until we got it sort of right.
Oh, that's great.
Hey, Joseph.
Yeah, I definitely
nice to see
that.
you. Yeah, Joseph is someone I know from my Java days. He's a very good guitar player and composes his own songs. And, but he has no cam on. Yeah, Joseph.
Oh, okay.
Or he's in a dark room.
Or he's in a dark room. Might be to boost his creativity. Are you still doing some music, Joseph? It's been a long time since I've seen something from you.
Is he in chat?
Yeah, he's in chat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, just post your link, your SoundCloud link, and we can all have a listen to it. There he goes.
Coffee.
I remember that he reminded me of some Frank Zappa stuff a few years ago. Quite some nice things.
Yeah, I like Zappa.
So, yes, it's been a very busy few days with PPG wave generator stuff, and then working on some new sounds. Well, one sound with the Slim Faddy.
Yeah, I noticed you got this control voltage working on that.
Yeah, I already had the control voltage working before, but I didn't really find it useful at the time to hook it up. I don't know. I was I'm still at my MIDI phase, I suppose. And there is a bug in the Slim Faddy where it's still there. There's a bug where the first negative MIDI value, pitch bend value, actually shifts up a couple of semitones. So that bug is there, and I was kind of tired of working around that. So I said, well, let's try CV stuff again. And yeah, Joseph, I'm connecting to my Minimoog. I'm saying my Slim Faddy that is sitting here. No, it's on my desk here. But Mike is playing it with his Voyager. This is my Slim Faddy. I'm connecting it through CV now. That's what we're talking about. So this is a CV out. And so yeah, I decided to get those CV outs working again that I bought a couple of months ago. And one thing that actually that I realized immediately was how fast the envelopes were going over CV. I don't know why, but I suppose that it it triggers the built-in envelopes from the Slim Fatty all the time, kind of going through the whole AHDSR cycle. While if you connect CV directly, it's strictly directed to the pressure of the key. So the envelopes are actually exactly related to how you press the key. So if you just hit it very quickly, you get a very percussive sound. That's the dog moving around in this. If you hit it very quickly, you get a very percussive sound, and you can also go very smoothly, like getting very slow pads coming in and going out again. And it's kind of, for each finger you have the envelope right there. It's quite nice when I started playing with that. Yeah. So that is actually on top of the regular envelopes of the Slim Fatty, Joseph. So what is happening is you've got the envelopes of the Slim Fatty triggering both for the amplifier and the filter. But then, since you can connect CV to control the voltage of the amplifier inside the synth, also they kind of mix together, and you can kind of global volume control through CV. Hey Nick, hey Antonio.
Hey, good to see you.
Yeah,
so
good
I'm
to
late.
see you too. That's okay. I was a couple of minutes late too.
Do they mix, or does the CV override it?
I've been trying to figure out. I wonder if it feels like a multiplier or something to me. I think that so you've got the amplifier volume might be the envelope that is in the Slim Fatty patch, and then the CV is connected to the main output, I think. So they're kind of active both at the same time. That is what it feels like to me. But I should read the manual, I suppose, before I can say something definite about that. But they're both active, and it seems like the CV one is the primary one that is having the last say. That's what it feels like. It sure plays nicely. I was going to put up a demo today before the Clubhouse, but then Wolfgang kept sending me more and more demo test versions of Wave Generator. So I think he sent like 3 or 4 today. Like, test this out. Is this better? Yes, this is better. Well, now there's that. And then, like,
Oh, that is great.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the first iPad app that actually has
multi-timbral MIDI, yeah.
Multi-timbral, yeah. That's neat.
It is very neat, yeah. I actually ordered the iConnect MIDI stuff that you recommended, Mike, because I've been running against the limitations of the I/O dock from Alice's. Apparently, it really doesn't handle the data rates at all that the Eigenharp is sending out.
I haven't been terribly happy with that product, and I find it's really noisy as well on the audio side.
Yeah. So, because I've actually been using MIDI over Wi-Fi instead of the Alice's I/O dock, because it seems to perform better, which is a bit says a lot.
So the other one should work better.
Yeah, that's what everyone is saying. You've got a good experience with that one, haven't you, Mike? iConnect MIDI.
Yeah. Although strangely, I tend to use it just as a generic interface, not especially for the iPad itself.
That's what it looks like. Like, really useful in many situations.
Yeah, it's pretty flexible.
So you can what is it like? It seemed to me like some kind of a MIDI hub, as you would have a USB hub. You can just connect everything into it and then just route it wherever you want. That's what it looked like to me.
Yeah, that's basically what it is. It would be nice if it had a little more processing in it, but
there's an app for it, isn't there, that you can use to kind of reconfigure it?
Yeah.
You have it also, Larry?
Yes, I do. Yeah. I do. Yeah.
I remember.
Yeah, there's a free app you can get that allows you to go in and actually connect things together. You have all your possibilities.
Yes.
And you can connect which is connecting to what, basically.
Yeah, and you can choose over those connections what passes and what doesn't. but you can't do remapping, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, that's already cool. Oh, Antonio is multiplying again. Antonio is turning himself into a gremlin. It's probably he ate after midnight and then some liquid dropped on his fur. And, like, poof, poof. And we saw the gremlin movie on TV the other day.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah.
Okay.
We just turned on TV.
Where did that come from?
Gremlins 2. You're like, oh my God, did they really make stuff like that back in the day?
I guess so.
That was a pretty bad movie, Gremlins 2. Gremlins 1 was okay, but Gremlins 2...
That happens, yeah. Sometimes the second one's not as good.
So, what have you guys been up to? Nick, got any further in your melodies that you're trying to play on the Pico?
No, not at all, actually. By the way, thank you very much for the script. That's lovely and makes... I think it makes the device look more impressive.
Yeah.
To be honest,
I agree.
I had some friends round over the weekend because it was my daughter's 3rd birthday, so that was lovely. And then afterwards, it was one of them who's sings and has played the flute. So show us this this instrument you've been talking about, and obviously I can't demonstrate it at all well. But it was very. A couple of interesting lessons from that. One was, first thing is, well, here's a scale on the Pico, which obviously wasn't terribly impressive. And then I did the next exercise I do typically, which is the sort of 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5 kind of going up the scale kind of thing. And suddenly it was, give me that. So that very simple scale was suddenly transformed her view of this thing.
Right.
And the second really interesting thing was, sort of gave it to a couple of people to see, was the surprise at how hard they needed to hit the keys. A couple of people expected to have the more I push down, the louder it is, as opposed to the faster I hit it, the louder it is. That's the piano setting.
That depends on the setting, of course.
So we said, well, change it to the setting instrument 4. That's extremely touch sensitive. If you switch it to the pads, then the I don't know what you call it, pressure, I guess, is part of it. And that was really interesting. That was also, I think, my reaction to when I first picked one up is, wow, you really, as a non-musician, I think obviously if you're a flautist, there's no sense of pressure in terms of how you use your fingerings at all. So that was kind of interesting. But no, I think I've got to pick a little tune and try to make it into something marvelous and multi-layered, but I just haven't spent enough time on that at all.
Yeah, and that's always a great learning process. It takes a long time, but kind of I always find that it jumpstarts you to the next level.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's kind of like Stairway to Heaven on the guitar, right? once you get past that. And, yeah, well, we need to find something like that for the Eigenharp.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it is. I do continue to find it hard to just pick a piece off the internet and say, okay, I'm going to learn this.
Yes.
And I personally want something which is a bit more than a single melody with my fingers. I want to be doing something slightly more interesting.
Hey, Randy.
A couple of lines. So yeah, and it's finding something which is a little more than a couple of lines, as in a couple of lines of music playing, is quite tough to find. But,
it is. Yeah.
So having to make it up yourself, I think, is probably the way to do it.
Well, it's a fun way. It's a fun way of learning the instrument. Just find a few basic chords and improvise over it.
Or you could try songs that are done in rounds. So there's tons of those in C major.
Yeah.
Oh, you're...
Yeah, that's
Dragitza is showing the fake book. It's there is actually a nice iPad app, I think, that has most of the real book in it.
Really?
Yeah. If you're up for that,
Figures.
lots of standards.
So yeah, and the other again, you're talking to someone who has zero musical experience. The process of strumming a tune or playing some chords, whilst simultaneously trying to sing a melody or keep time with melody, is to me non-trivial.
It is not trivial at all.
Yeah.
It's one of the most difficult things, I think, with people that try to play the guitar and sing over it. And it's totally different.
Really? Okay.
Natalie, my girlfriend, it's a thing that she's got trouble with. She knows how to play, certain guitar chords quite well, and she sings very well. But once she has to combine both, then you kind of have to detach both parts of your brain.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think the nice thing in learning an electronic instrument is that you can kind of do it in stages. You can first focus on laying down a couple of chords and then put that into some loops and then play over that and learn to play some melodies over it. So it's a bit less stressful, and then afterwards you might try to combine it. If you've got on the pico, that will be hard, but if you've got a tau or an alpha, play arrangement with the left hand and melody with the right hand, or the other way around, if that's what you like. Yes, what Joseph says is right. Everything the hands do have to be kind of automated, and then you can sing over it. Once if you still think about it, then you're kind of screwed. I read this nice. What's she called again? There's this classical guitarist on G+, Heike. I don't know what her last name is. She plays very nice stuff, and she was posting the last blog post was about a concert that she did, and she was like she was posting all the stages of the day of the concert, and then going back to bed, not wanting to wake up, and then, oh my god, I forgot everything, and then I played through it. Yeah, it was kind of all right, but I didn't have any feeling. Wow, this is gonna be hard, and then I'm gonna get ready for the concert. Jesus, I don't remember the first chords. Oh my god! And on the way to the concert, and I don't remember anything anymore, and then she steps on stage and still no first chords in my memory, and then I remember the first note. She lays her hand on her guitar and off she goes to the whole concert, and it's a marvelous concert. It's just everything is just inside your muscle memory, and that's when it gets good. See what Joseph says. Have you ever played Chapman stick? How well do you think the stick techniques would transfer to the Eigenharp? Muscle memory, not head memory. I haven't played the Chapman stick. What I do found myself when picking up the Eigenharp at first was I was kind of surprised at how easily the dexterity from my guitar kind of transferred. I didn't have to go through the whole stages of independently moving fingers to kind of combine chords and melodies, and I thought that was kind of a good bootstrap that transferred over quite nicely, I think. So next question, the Eigenharp treats both hands as primary sources. That's up to you. The standard factory setup kind of puts you into a piano mode where you play it as both hands are equally important on the piano surface, but it could be differently set up. There is actually a new functionality in the latest version of Eigen-D that I quite like a lot, and I still haven't had enough time to play with it. It's called the finger, and the finger is a mode in which you can put it so that you can say what happens whenever you combine different keys at the same time, a little bit like a valved instrument. So when you play with one finger, you will have that note. When you play with two fingers, another note. When you let one go and put another finger, it will be another note again. And this becomes very interesting because you can combine it, which is something that you don't have on a valved instrument, with polyphony. You could say, with my right hand I play, for example, bass notes, and then with my left hand I will build polyphony based on that bass note that I've played with my right hand, and the polyphony will be like, okay, I'm playing 1/3 up, a 5th up, a 7th up. And so in that way you can actually totally dissociate what each hand brings to the table. One can be responsible for lead or for roots, and the other one can bring in polyphony whenever you think that's important. And then there's another functionality that's called the strummer that also is part of the latest version of Eigenharp, where you can do basically what a guitar does. Is you have one hand or is the input source for the keys that are being pressed, or the frequencies, and the other one becomes the trigger and can drive what the other hand selects. So it is like strumming strings or rubbing over strings, because you can bend and get all the pressure information in there also. So yeah, it depends on what you want to do. That's a long answer to Joseph's question. Anything you guys want to say about that? Because I'm doing this as one of the developers, so maybe it might not be very comprehensible.
Well, it covers it pretty good. There's so many ways to go about the Eigenharp, especially if you get a alpha or a tau or something. It's hard to give a short answer on that.
Dragica, you've been playing around with the finger? Have you been playing around with the finger?
Yes, I have. I have used this gray one, the one that has 31 notes, and I played around a little bit. So I had microtonal stuff in there, and it's really fun to play around with. I mean, it's you have a huge range, and then people, I mean, I am in the workshops with the other guys, and they think they know what you're doing, and then you start to use chords, and it's like, yeah, you can have a lot of fun. It's really a lot of fun, because it's on one hand it's like a flute with a slightly strange, in this case, the strange finger setting, but it works. And on the other hand, you can do something a flute never can do. Play a chord. Yeah,
bring in polyphony. Yes. So just for Joseph and Randy, I think they don't know what the gray code configuration is. It's basically, it's a very geeky way of going through fingers. It's each time you change one finger, it moves one note up the scale, and it's. Joseph probably follows that very well. It's like it's binary, but in such a way that you only have to change one binary at a time, so 1 0 1 at a time. But meaning that you can get to a range of how many octaves is it?
It's 31 notes.
Yeah, 31 notes on
which means four octaves.
Yeah, on just one, with one hand. So you can get very
on 8 keys.
Yeah. Can get very far
with that. So you have 8 keys for other things.
Yes.
Which is fun too.
Yes. So yeah, I've been playing around with that one also. It's a nice one. There is an error in the one in the factory setup though. I've corrected it.
I found that I've corrected it. No, one was not. It wasn't working, and I thought, okay, I'm doing something wrong. And then I found out that probably it's in the setup, not in my playing.
One of the things. Yeah, go ahead.
Let's say everybody's using the finger on the Pico. Is that right?
Actually, yeah, I haven't tried it on the alpha yet, but I think one of the things that I want to start doing is actually to use the fingerer with my Slim Fatty on just one 4x4. One 4x4 rectangle, and then have all the rest available for other stuff. So Randy's questions are electronic. So these are electronic instruments. Are they easily updatable then via internet? Yes. So there are a lot of updates coming out of the software. One of the ideas behind the Eigenharp, which is quite different from the standard way in which electronic instruments work, is that it always works with the computer. So you don't have built-in firmware that has to be updated. It's basically all the data from the electronic instrument is sent without being cut down straight to the computer, and it's a huge amount of data. I think, what is the amount? I think 6 keys. So the information of 6 keys is roughly equivalent to a 48 kilohertz audio stream. So there's quite a lot of information, and that comes into the software that runs on the computer, which you can update, and there are quite regular updates from that. And in that software, you can basically totally reconfigure what happens with that information that comes in from the instrument. It can work. Yeah, go ahead, Mike. You're very good at explaining this.
Actually, there's two questions there. One is, can they be kept current? And the answer is yes, if you don't mind doing the update of the week. But there's lots of updates, and they're kept very current. The other aspect, which I don't think people who haven't come across an Eigenharp would just assume, is the level of configurability. So they're updatable in the sense of being kept current from factory software or improvements in the software, but they're almost infinitely configurable by the end user.
And you can connect them, which is very, very. It's also that because it's not a fixed setting, you can connect them to other stuff that's already here, like Gert's Slim Fatty, my audio unit stuff, Live, Logic, whatever. It's the software is a bridge,
and
not
Gert's
an island.
Gert's also using a MIDI guitar through EigenD also, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can also combine them with other stuff like audio cubes or any other electronic instruments. Yeah, sorry, I cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, as soon as he said MIDI guitar, I mean, I'm a guitar player. I've been playing guitar for 50 years. Mm-hmm. I built my own electronic stuff probably 30 years ago with, oscillators, transistors, resistors, and so on. So I'm interested in all of these fields. My initial perception of this, looking at like 3 YouTube videos, the performances were interesting, but I'm just guessing that this is there's the controller, which is the hard, you don't build those easily yourself. So the controller, which looks really interesting, and that controller is sending all these messages, and that is then going someplace to what I thought was an instrument, but maybe is just a computer. I don't know.
It's software. It's software running on the computer. Yes.
I mean, I got that, and the reason I wasn't going to interrupt because I think everybody else knows all this stuff, but it is interesting to me, and I was wondering if, well, here's my point really. Looking at the YouTube videos, I mean, I was going to ask if you do any Hangouts where you do like short demos and then they're interactive. And the reason I say that is because I don't like to look at like 50 YouTube videos. In fact, I'm somebody who gets really irritated when you do a search and it's all YouTube stuff. Because if I want the answer to one question, I don't want to go through all that. The YouTube stuff's interesting because it's just so totally different than any other instrument. So, I mean, it was worth looking at a few, and there's some great stuff. In fact, I think a couple of you probably did some or all of those, as far as I know. But anyway, that's great stuff. But it'd be interesting to get a feel of this by having a demo, and it would be great to set one up, and why not set up a Hangout on air? Maybe you've already done that a couple of times.
We've done it a few times, and that's actually one of the reasons that we have this Hangout here every week. What has happened is we have had both situations where we do demos right on the spot. So if you want to see something, any one of us can demo, or that we talk through what someone would like to have demoed, and then we do that later on as a Hangout on air. Mm-hmm. So we've done both things. So it's really up to you.
I'll keep watching.
If you want some stuff to see demoed, don't hesitate. Just ask about it, and we'll see if it's easily done right here and there, or if we need some preparation to do that. Then it will be a little bit later. So it's.
Well, you might want to do one if you haven't already. You might want to do one where you just announce, "Hey, we're going to do a little interactive thing," and if you're interested in this, come and take a look. And of course, I would if I could. I'm not always available. Mm-hmm. The reason I was immediately rang my bell on guitar is because I have been also playing guitar synthesizer for a long, long time, and I've got one right next to me. Mm-hmm. In back of me, I have a wind controller. And speaking of a lot of messages, I mean, the wind controller, it's a Yamaha. The wind controller sends an awful lot of junk out there. It's all, and it's talking to its controller, and it's got sounds, and you do it that way. So everybody's always interested in expanding into new controller paradigms, right? Where you've learned, what am I going to do? So now I'm starting to play upright bass, and people say, well, why didn't you why didn't you play fretted bass? Because it's just almost the same as a guitar. It's like a part of a guitar. And the difference is you're starting on a whole new world. With not only is it fretless, the upright bass, but it's also like this. So it's like a different. So anyway, the Eigenharp is also like this totally different thing, just like the stick was. Somebody mentioned, or starting with tapping.
I think it's a mistake to think of the Eigenharp only as a controller.
No, I think it's an instrument. I didn't mean to limit it, but go ahead.
Well, and I had to laugh when you talked about your WX. I have one of those too, and I used to actually try and do some editing of the data, and it was like, okay, let's forget this. But it holds nothing to an Eigenharp in terms of data flow. I mean, it's amazing the amount of data that comes out of an Eigenharp. And I didn't mean to sort of cut you off on the controller. It's just when those discussions happen, people sort of start spending money on stuff thinking it's going to be one thing, and then they're quite surprised when it requires a little configuration to make it do that. Because it's not sort of what its native best use is.
Yeah, I think I kind of got that from just thinking about. This is one of those things I think you need to get your hands on. You probably all would agree about that. As far as getting the total impression of it, you probably have to pick it up and play it.
Nick was talking about showing people, and it's amazing if you hand somebody a Pico and it's set to a scale, they just sort of start making music. It's astonishing.
Because in all fairness, they do that on the iPad too with that whatever that thing is.
There is one difference on the iPad, which is that you actually have to look at it.
Yeah.
Definitely, the Eigenharp has a much nicer tactile feel, and once you learn how to play it, it's like any other instrument in that your fingers know what they're supposed to do, more or less. And so you don't have to sit there and study it all the time. Like that's the only trouble that I see with the iPad is that you really have no feedback other than the sound as far as where you're putting your fingers. Even though it does a lot of nice things, it lacks that part, which would probably be very difficult if you're playing in a live situation, I would think.
You mean tactile feedback?
Yeah, tactile feedback. I mean, when I'm playing my iPad, whatever interface it has on it, whether it's circles or keys or stars or whatever, I mean, I can look at it and see what I'm doing. But as soon as I look away, I have no reference as to where my fingers are anymore, other than hearing what they do, which is not the best.
I'd like to say something else about that. Sorry. To me, it's not only tactile feedback. It's an emotional connection. It's like when I lay my fingers on my guitar strings, I feel something. Even if I don't play, just the fact that they're there and those are my guitar strings, and I know exactly what I'm gonna feel, and it's kind of reassuring and puts me into this certain mindset and emotionality. And I have that also with the Eigenharp keys. For instance, I don't have that with piano keys. I've been trying to play piano since forever. Did piano classes and everything, and I don't feel that same connection with it. It's not part of my body. While I have that with the guitar and I have that with the Eigenharp. So that's. So to me, it's not only tactile feedback, it's actually the physical connection that you have with something that moves.
Garrett, all of the variables on the Eigenharp have 1024 levels. Is that true?
Sorry, how many volume knobs are there on iPad and similar touchscreens?
All of the various variables like pressure, pitch, yaw, pressure, they're 1024 levels? 1K of level?
Sorry, I'm not following you. I was reading Randy's
I'm
question, and I'm
reading
kind of
Randy's question.
Yeah.
I maybe can ask that question a little better.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
My question is, and I'm reacting on what you were just saying, basically, which is you sit down at a piano, and if you are not an accomplished piano player, one thing I would suggest you might want to try to do is sit down and take one finger and see how many different, get a VU meter and see how many different volumes you can, that's a physical instrument, it's not electronic. So theoretically, you have an infinite number, but how many different numbers can you do? Now, I do that all the time, and I try to tell people the one thing I could teach most guitar players, I'm not a great teacher, but I would tell them, get a VU meter or a lead, one of those things. Set it up and look at the different levels of the notes you're playing. Play one note or two notes and look at the volume. And a lot of people, especially if they start using compression and stuff, basically everything's at the same volume. There's one volume. It's on or off. But a real musician, that's part of your expression. And as you say, it's holding that instrument. It's like dancing with someone. You're holding someone. It isn't going to be the same if it's a wooden mannequin, right? No matter how great that the design is of that thing. You're not going to dance and you're not going to have the feeling. And so getting back to the Eigenharp, how many, I'm not asking for an actual count, but I mean, presumably you have a really good level of accent, of notes, different volume of the same touch. Whereas on the iPad, and that was the original question, I don't know how many possible, they might even say that there's 256 levels, but I bet that you'd have to spend your life getting more than 16 levels of, maybe even more than 8 levels of volume of a note. Now, we can measure these pretty accurately, but how accurate is your touch going to be? So getting back to the Eigenharp question.
So there's two questions there. How many levels are there, and how many levels can you actually physically draw out of the machine if you're a skilled player?
That's the most interesting part, the second one.
I'm not sure about, I think that they're both very important. Just basic example. If you want to have something swell so you control the level from 0 to maximum, right? Because there are different styles of playing. I know that you're a tapping guitarist, meaning that you're probably more interested in what happens at the attack phase. I'm just assuming there. I'm really based on what you're playing,
right.
More interested in what happens at the attack phase, at what happens at the sustain or even the release phase of your musical expression. So if let's say that you only have 16 levels that the instrument supports, and you want to do a gradual kind of sustain, you will have and we'll kind of step through that, meaning that it will not be smooth at all. So that's one thing. Then the other thing is,
which you can hear on a WX7.
Yeah.
Or 5.
And so there's another thing that is even at the attack phase, and that's the extremely interesting part, I think, is that MIDI only has 128 theoretical levels, right? So each MIDI note has from 0 to 127. So I was playing this is my favorite virtual MIDI piano, which is Modart's Piano Tech. And so they typically, it's a model piano. It's not a sampled piano. It's a model piano. So it can theoretically reach any level that you can imagine, right? With just a floating point number. So it can be anything. But since MIDI is limited to 128, you only have 128. But in one of the latest versions, they added support for high-resolution note velocity, which is an extension to the MIDI specification that allows you to reach, what is 14-bit? It's 65,000 levels,
wow.
So something like that. And I have to say to you that to me, it drastically changed a lot. And certainly when you're trying to play softly, because if you play softly and you try to really be very emotional with your sound, and you get kind of snapped to something that is not where you happen to be playing, that you expected to hear, you kind of get disconnected from it. Even though you probably can't consciously hit more than 8 different levels, saying, okay, now I'm going to play softly, now I'm going to play more loudly. But during your performance, if all those soft parts are actually kind of fixed around the same level, it will feel much less emotional.
Well, and I guess the other aspect of that comes out is how we all tweak the various sample libraries and models that we play, specifically so that you can play the envelope, specifically so that you can do what Gert's talking about. So all of these nice bits of automation that tend to be in all the compact things, most of us, the first thing we do is go turn them all off. Well, because they prevent you actually playing the sound.
And it goes, to me, this kind of goes back to what the difference it's why Mike instantly reacted. Don't think of the Eigenharp as a controller, and I've been having this discussion for years. But to me, it is what basically sets apart a physical instrument from a controller, is that there is an element of chaos that you never can control. On a physical instrument with physical strings, even you might be the best guitarist in the world or the best violinist in the world, the physical nature of it is, even though you are playing in pitch and you might be playing as perfectly in pitch as you want to be, it will always be off. Always. There will always be tiny little vibrations that go a bit differently, and based on air temperature and based on whatever is going on, the oldness of your strings, if your guitar has been refurbished, and anything is affecting that particular thing. While a controller is 100% repeatable. You press on something and that will happen. It will be done through software, and that's it. It's a fixed pitch. Well, if you get into what the Eigenharp is trying to do, having so much data that the tiny little bits of chaos around the pitch that sounds in tune, if you can have those tiny little bits of variations around the fixed pitch, it becomes living. Because just the fact of holding your finger on the key and breathing will kind of introduce this almost imperceptible vibrato that is just part of the fact that your hands don't hold still. Which you don't have on a typical MIDI keyboard, where you just press on the key and that's it, it's off, you're done, the note has played. And the fact that this element of chaos is possible is due to the fine-grainedness of the information, due to the amount of different steps that are possible, so that those imperceptible small changes don't bother anyone, but make it living and breathing. That's
actually,
how I see
Gert,
it.
that's the first time that discussion has been framed in this context, and it's interesting. So the question was, how many levels can you play? And my head immediately jumped to the idea that it would be a good thing if you could control that finely and definitively. You just made an impassioned argument for it being a good thing that you can't.
Yes.
Because it adds an organic dimension to whatever it is you're playing that's really a hallmark of something like, say, something that's fretless.
But presumably, it's a good thing that you can't quite control it, but that you can almost have a conversation with it. You can feed back to the instrument in terms of what you're hearing. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're getting with something which is incredibly fine-grained, yes, but still highly controllable, as opposed to something which has a very small number of discrete steps in there.
Yes.
Well, and it's worth noting that you actually do get curves for that. It's like on your wind controller, there's a flat spot, and if you use tight lip control, there's a flat spot in the middle so that you can reasonably get close to a note without warbling around it, and you can do the similar kind of curves.
That was a great answer, because if you look at the absolute opposite situation, the MIDI guitar that I currently have, it isn't MIDI, by the way, at all. It's a GR or something. I've had so many, I can't remember. This is it's a GR1. Funny how the Japanese number backwards, so you had the 50 first and then the one. Yeah. Anyway, point being, it's really backwards in its guitar. Guitar synthesizers work, the ones that work by detecting the note and using that as the controller, turning that into a control signal, are completely backwards. So no matter how hip you are on that, it's more limited than the MIDI itself, really. Even if you're not using MIDI, the detector, the pickup is faster because the electronics are internal, so it's not going over MIDI, and it doesn't have like a 200 millisecond lag that you get used to playing with. But the bottom line is you don't have the nuances. So that's probably why when I keep saying, the controller, it's because the controller it really is a controller, whereas the MIDI guitar, the GR1, isn't really a controller. It's like this kind of a real half-assed way of picking up, guessing what you played on the guitar. And the reason that's important is because when you're playing certain sounds, like piano, which I like to do because it sounds great on stage and stuff, but when you do that, it's really easy to play bad notes because there's always a point where the software doesn't decide the right note, or it hears a noise and thinks it's a note. So I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about there.
Yeah, but it's very hard to play a note that isn't actually a note.
Well, you don't on the guitar, as I think you just said.
Exactly.
So that's why that's an impressive thought and something that should probably be written down somewhere. It's great.
You also hinted at something else, which is the Eigenharps have very low latency, and so as Nick said, you actually can interact to interact very quickly with the sound that you're making.
Yes.
So especially if you're doing atmospheric stuff, you can really play the things that have a lot of sound design in them. I'm going to bring a certain person to the front in this conversation, I bet, any moment, unless the construction is still going on at her house.
No, it stopped. They stop at around 5 o'clock.
Ah.
But they drive me crazy. The whole house is vibrating.
Well, someone wrote a song about that. They drive me crazy.
Yeah, I probably have to learn that. Yes, you can control the stuff. And I think what I like about the Eigenharp, if we leave out all the technical stuff and all the stuff is, if you play it, when you play it with people, for people, in a concert, or I did a lot in workshops, you forget that you're not playing an instrument. You just forget it. It's you play. That the sound is coming from the speaker, you actually forget completely. Because you feel, as God said, I mean, you feel more in control the more you play. You're never fully in control, but you feel like you are playing something, not controlling something or pressing buttons. It's something else. It's like playing an instrument, which I think is really important because you concentrate. In the end, when all is said and done, you take this thing in your fingers and you play it.
One of the things that I said when I was with Roger Lynn in the States last year was what I thought was really interesting, that I was playing an electronic instrument where it is stressful to play in tune. You have to actually be aware of playing in tune or out of tune. It's, the pitch is not a given. You have to actually train to make sure that you're hitting the notes correctly and playing in tune, which is nice. I like that. It gets you much more of the emotion. How did I say this? Much more emotional as a musician, I think.
Yeah.
It's much more connected to what you're doing. And if you play out of tune, you're actually able to do that and to use that for your performance and to create it, to use tension and to use microtonal scales and to even evolve and modulate those during your performance.
So what do you typically set your pitch bend to?
It depends. I typically set it to 5 semitones now. When I want to be comfortable, when I want to be experimental, it's an octave. Actually, after the last Clubhouse of last week, it was quite interesting. So the bass player from our band, he's a guy that has toured quite a lot, and with one of these bands, he used to do this exercise where, actually very similar to I think what you do in the improvisation workshop, Dragica, is there is this series of bubbles that play one after each other. So someone is kind of the director and decides who in the band is going to play together, and it's going to be that person, then going to be follow up with 2 other persons, and then another person, and kind of have to follow up onto each other with certain idea in mind. The thing is, you don't know what the other one is going to play, and you have to start at the same time. And as soon as you start, you have to defend the idea that you've started with until it naturally resolves itself as a finished phrase or theme. And I was scared out of my brain to do that on the Eigenharp. It was like, this is gonna be a fiasco. On the guitar, I would have done it without any trouble. It would not have been that interesting. I said, okay, let's give this a go. And it was actually very, very, very nice to do that in the Eigenharp, because I was able to get at all those weird things, and it kind of, fell into place, and being able to be very expressive with it, and not even play melodies. You could just kind of create soundscapes by just having slurs and whatever. So that was
you can.
Go ahead.
You can do so much fun stuff. I mean, things like there is this things in country where you have this washboard thingy.
Yeah.
Which you play like this, and with some sounds on the Eigenharp, this works great. This is just, if you want to be in the background, just being a little bit additional percussive, but the other ones are doing great stuff and you don't want to interrupt them, you can do stuff like this. I mean, there's no other instrument where you can play on one hand something that really feels like a cello, and on the other hand just do the percussive stuff like the washboard, just to have a little bit of percussion to give the other ones, let's say, to give the whole thing a little bit more dimension.
Yes.
Not really playing something, but just adding depth in the same set with more or less the same instrument. So, yeah.
Yes. So getting back, I think it was very interesting to improvise with that. We got at a stage that I randomly clicked on a sound, not knowing what it was. And this is what I'm going to defend in the next time that I have to play, without actually knowing what it's going to sound like, and it's quite interesting. So you have to play together with someone on that for at least 2 minutes. Right?
Sometimes you curse yourself.
Yes, but it's still a lot of fun. So yeah. Cool. Well, I'm actually very glad that you were able to make it, Randy. Are you living in France?
I am. I've been living here for something like 30 years now.
Cool. In which region of France are you located?
Bordeaux.
Bordeaux. When was that? I think it's about 15 years ago. I took my bicycle on the train and got off at Bordeaux and drove around for a month on the bicycle all around Bordeaux.
It's a great place.
Yeah,
it's fairly flat, and lots of, I don't know about 15 years ago, but right now there's a lot of bicycle, whatever they're called, little paths and stuff around town. So, yeah. Well, I'm glad everybody was able to put up with my ignorance of the instrument. I'd love to get my hands on one someday, and maybe it'll happen. But I have so many different. I appreciate that. I'll try to make more of these, and I will look around for different demos. I've watched about 3 of them, I think, and I'll certainly watch for any Hangouts where you're maybe going to just do short little things.
Well, the Monday one's recurring, and we could certainly have our instruments fired up, and then you could sort of say, well, try this. And it's not as good as holding it, but it is better than watching canned stuff.
Well, it also would be interesting to me, I guess there are at least 3 different iterations of this, right, or models, and of different complexity. So even that whole beginner thing, and if I say this is for my own, if I'm asking about it, I'm sure there are a lot of other people who would be interested too. And so I don't know if there's a, maybe if I go back to the main website, there's a path where you look at and you go, well, what's the difference between these three or however many there are? There 3, by the way? I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
Good guess. What the differences are, and rather than having to look too much, that would be something that would be of interest to me, and just how it works. What it looks like.
So
hello.
They're
I'm
early.
Run along.
They're early. And usually they come in 5 minutes later or something like that.
I'm going to run, folks. Thank you all.
Me too. Thanks a lot for being there.
Again.
And Randy, I think the easiest thing to do this is normally on this Hangout, I have everything fired up and ready to go. If there is something that you really anything that you want to see and you're interested in, just send me a message and I prepare it for next time, and I'll send you an invite, and then we'll do it as an on air and get it going. So.
I'm going to the States. I'm going to Atlanta next week. I don't know. Maybe there's a music store there that has one. You never know. I won't have a lot of time, but
it's
so I won't be. I can tell you right now, I won't be here next week. But I'll certainly watch for these things. And Monday's not really a too bad a day.
Okay.
I do have some things I need to do now, though. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Bye. And I'm signing off also. Bye, everyone. Thanks for being there.
Bye.
Bye. See you next
Cheers.
week. Bye.